Hey everyone, welcome to The Delta, a podcast about how blockchain and technology is changing our financial environment and discussing its impact on society. My name is Rustin Cavell, and joining with me today is my co-founder Dan Durney. We also have a great guest with us today. Taylor Zork is a CPA who's been working in the crypto space for quite a few years. He's also a co-founder of Crypto CFOs, goodness, which we'll dive into a little bit into this episode. Taylor, it's great to have you here, man.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Maybe just to get started, would you mind sharing a bit about your background, how you ended up in the digital asset space, and then we'll dive into crypto CFOs a little bit in this episode as well.
Yeah, awesome. So, I started my career as a CPA at Big Four. I was at PwC and kind of a specialty tax group. Quickly found out that Big Four accounting wasn't for me. I thought I'd move to a smaller kind of public accounting firm in Vermont. Really didn't like that either. Then decided to go into like more corporate accounting. So I worked at Burton Snowboards in their finance department there. Um, then switched from accounting role to more of a finance role in Burton. So I kind of went through this slow realization that like working for other people, even if it was at a wonderful company like Burton, just wasn't for me. I really have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So I decided to my wife and I went traveling for a bit. We were teaching acro yoga and acrobatics and across the world in Guatemala, Bali, a couple other places, Costa Rica here as well. And just kind of fell into this like remote accounting work. And I really started to realize that these niche industries were where the money was. And especially like the interesting work as well was in these different niche industries. So I got started in the cannabis industry first. And then while we were traveling, I met a friend of mine in Guatemala when we were at one of these artist residencies, and turned me on to the crypto industry. And I had heard about Bitcoin when I was back at PwC. That was back in like 2013. So it was like, I forget the price, but it was like stupid low. But at that time, I didn't really get it. And I didn't really kind of see I saw that there was like, this was a speculative asset that could like potentially go to the moon, but I didn't really have any investing money and I didn't really have the kind of like gumption to go after it. So when I met my friend in Guatemala, he introduced me to Ethereum and smart contracts. And for me, that was the aha moment that was like, okay, wow, this is going to really impact finance and the ability to transact without middlemen and things like that really kind of clicked in my mind from a finance perspective. So I got interested in the industry and just started trying to find work and trying to kind of get my foot in the door at different places. And I really realized that not a lot of accountants were serving the space. So I just started helping that one friend out with some projects that he had, eventually fell into some CFO roles, and the rest is history. Really had to kind of learn everything on my own because I didn't really have a lot of other folks to communicate with on the issues. So that's how I fell into it.
Super interesting. I think I can definitely relate to like starting in a corporate environment and then moving through as my career progressed. Curious if you have any thoughts on why so many folks end up in Web3 and crypto, coming from like very, corporate backgrounds or sort of that old notion of like chasing like the prestige of working at certain companies.
I think for me, and I think this might be true for a lot of other people, I think there's a lot of those of us that are like, I think intellectually curious are more drawn to this industry because it's exciting to work in a field that is like the wild wild west, right? Like the rules are there, but like not all of them are there, and there's constantly evolving products and use cases that are, really. I mean, if you're interested in learning, it's a really fun industry to be a part of because there's no shortage of learning, and I think that uh, just being involved in a space that has that aspect to it, and then also I'm very motivated by what the industry has to offer for the world. I think the democratization of finance is important. I think that Bitcoin is the most equitable money that's ever existed, and I think that me putting my money where the mouth is, and being able to earn money, whether it's a bear or a bull, in an industry that I love is really kind of what drew me to it. So I think for me, it was the intellectual curiosity behind it, and just that striving to constantly be learning. Because cannabis was really interesting at first, but once you learn about 280E and 471C, those are the main two tax codes that we look at for that industry. And after that, it's like not really much is new. So that's what I love about crypto, is that you're constantly learning and constantly finding new use cases for an industry that really hasn't fully developed yet.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's like where all the nerds go to hang out, but like people who are super passionate about that space and also willing to live in the sort of gray area where, like, as you're saying, like a lot of this isn't defined. Curious if that sort of played into your inspiration to start crypto CFOs and sort of build a whole company around that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, when I was working, I was at TrustSwap, which was, it started off as just really like an audited smart contract platform. The founder was really seeking, he was doing some OTC deals with different tokens for projects that he had held. And he was like running into needing to have lawyers involved. And like they were charging like a 5% fee to like just be the middleman, basically. And he was like, what are we doing? Like, this is all like capable of being done in smart contracts on Ethereum. Like, are there any audited smart contracts that I can go out and use that I don't have to create myself? And so that's how TrustSwap was born, out of this desire to have a audited smart contract platform that you could go and use. So right now they acquired their largest competitor while I was there, Team Finance. So they are at one point they were the largest total value locked for these smart contract platforms, but basically we allowed for the ability to lock up tokens for teams that are launching, liquidity tokens, so you could kind of help to assure new investors that you weren't going to rug them, because you could show that the items were locked in there. So when I joined, it was July 2020. It was like right before the token launched, and it was like the Wild West in DeFi. It was like Uniswap V2 had recently launched, and we were this company that started off as a smart contract platform, but turned into a launch pad. So we were launching tokens on DEXs. And so I was learning how to like deal with LP funding, liquidity pool funding, and all this stuff that just like didn't have rules. No one had defined it. No one was giving courses on it. And so what I started to do is I used to, I was friends with the CFO of Gilded, which was a subledger platform that recently got acquired by Bitwave. And we would just like have meetings of the minds with Joey Ryan, who was there, CFO of Gilded, and then Dr. Sean Stein-Smith, who is very active in the space as well. He's a professor. I forget which university. But we would just like meet up and be like, hey, I have this issue that I need to deal with. And, what do you guys think of this reasoning on how I came to this answer? And so that was really helpful for me. But it was really hard to find people to aid me in my work as CFO of a major crypto project. And so I just saw these major pain points in the industry for accounting professionals, like not wanting to seem dumb and having a kind of a town square to talk about issues. And then also like not having trained staff and having just this massive gap in the industry of people serving it from the accounting and tax perspective. So the firms that I did find for like outsourced bookkeeping, they all kind of like were able to talk the talk, but couldn't really walk the walk. So it was like a combination of a bunch of different pain points that I encountered as CFO of a couple different projects. So that's where it was born from.
You mentioned the Wild West of DeFi back in 2020. It still feels like the Wild West in a lot of ways, but curious from your perspective, from a tax and legal and compliance perspective, specifically for CFOs and CPAs, do you feel like it's a little bit less, like we're moving east away from the West a little bit?
I think that the the ETFs are changing the game in a big way, and I think also in that cycle, the 2020 cycle, that bull cycle, we saw like Tesla. I think it was around that time that Tesla started to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet, and I think that I think Celmix Scientific just added like $40 million of Bitcoin to their balance sheet. I think as we see more of this institutional adoption, and we see clarity from FASB with fair value accounting, and common sense movements. Not all of it's common sense, like the IRS broker regs that just came out, the final regs, still has some murkiness to it, and it still kind of doesn't make it clear as to how these DeFi platforms are going to comply. But I think we are moving in the right direction, right? Even if it's bad regulation, it's at least a goalpost that then hopefully we can move or adjust to fit the industry and what the industry is capable of and the ethos of the industry. But I do think we're moving in the right direction. It's slow, and I think that regulation will always be like 5 years behind the trends. But because that's just the nature of how things work, in the regulatory environment. But I think that we are moving in the right direction, and I think there's more clarity around it. I think the broker regs and the new 1099 DA rules with like the reporting that's going to be required of these non-custodial actors, I think is going to be challenging. But we did have some forward progress with regards to those as well, but we can get into that stuff later. But yeah, I do think we're moving in the right direction. Definitely not where we need to be for like ultimate clarity on how things should be treated and how to act in the industry. But we're definitely getting, I guess, more clarity than we had, what is it, 4 years ago now? Wow, crazy. Time flies.
Time has flown. That's right.
Yeah.
Do you maybe want to speak to the regulations a little bit and maybe speak to them from the perspective of listeners who may not be as in depth into the tax perspective as maybe some of the people who have been working in the industry for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the place to look at for that is like really like as I started to talk about there was the broker regs, and effectively how they were originally proposed was basically saying that like all these DeFi platforms that currently are permissionless and don't require any KYC, which is I think one of the best aspects of this industry is the fact that you don't need to KYC to a lot of these permissionless platforms, because the reality of what you're doing is you are interacting with code. You're not interacting with another person, and so there's no possession. They're non-custodial actors. They're not taking possession of your funds, and that's the beauty of it, is that you don't have to trust in a third party. You are relying on the code. You can verify the code if you know how to read the code, but the trust that you're putting is into immutable code that is on chain, that is viewable and open source, right? So I think that it's important to note that. And when you start to get into regulations that require you to KYC individuals, that these platforms don't really have any railways to do that. Like currently, the way that Uniswap is set up, I mean, if you pull up the website, it's just literally what asset do you want to dispose of? What asset do you want to acquire? And then you click a button and you go, right? And so there's no, other than you having the wallets, the funds in your wallet, there's no requirement of you to be a certain person or a certain, and I think that that's the beauty of DeFi, in that it eliminates the possibility for, I guess, like mistreatment. Like, right? Like you hear about all these stories of folks getting like lower valuations on their houses because their last name is Hispanic or things like that. Like when you go onto Aave, which is a DeFi lending and borrowing platform, if you have the collateral to post in a smart contract and lock it up, you can borrow up to what their code says you can borrow. It doesn't matter who you are, what your credit score is, anything like that. If you have the funds, you can borrow against them. And I think that that's a beauty of DeFi. And I'm not saying that introducing KYC is going to kind of like make that go away, but it's a huge problem. And I think that another aspect of this is that there's billions of transactions that happen in DeFi across the year. And so when you add these reporting requirements where you have to take down the person's name and the address and their social security number, you're creating a reporting requirement that is huge. And it's not just for the IRS, it's for you're going to basically, what I think is going to happen is if the regs kind of finalize as they're currently stand, you're going to have DeFi platforms geo-blocking US residents from being able to participate, because the burden of documentation that they have to go through is going to bankrupt them as foundations. And just to be clear, like Uniswap, the example I was giving for the decentralized exchange, like they have created the code that that allows the system to operate. The only thing that they do is they kind of like help out with the DAO and things like that. So they don't actually interact with the code itself. They may make updates to the code if the DAO agrees on certain upgrades, but they're not like collecting information on people. And that's what these regulations would change, is they would have to start collecting information on people that isn't currently on chain. And I think the biggest argument that people make is that, like, hey, IRS, why are you requiring us to send this information to you? You guys have the same ability to gather this information as we do. It's all on chain, it's all public, and you guys have the tools to track people down on chain. So I think that there's a lot of muddiness, and I know I'm going on and on about this, but I think that there's a lot of challenges that come out with these new regulations that overreach on what the reporting should be for items like this. So we'll see how those finalize, because right now the way that they're currently written, um, everything that I've mentioned with what they're requiring excludes non-custodial actors, but they did say in the final regs that they are expeditiously working on defining how this is going to work for non-custodial actors. So we don't necessarily know how it's going to work for dexes yet, but we should know in the coming months. So yeah, big reporting requirement, and it's going to be detrimental to the DeFi space if it goes through as is.
I think that poses a lot of centralization risk, at least in the US,
Mhm.
where it will just be these giant centralized organizations who can incur the regulatory and compliance costs of being able to adhere to these regulations and reporting. The thing that I think concerns me the most is whether it will be that punitive for self custodial actors. Because it's like, yes, there are ways to be able to acquire Bitcoin or digital assets through non KYC mechanisms. It's typically very expensive to do so. And it kind of seems like the vast majority of people go through centralized exchanges as on and off ramps, anyways, simply because that's where the liquidity is. That's how you can connect your bank account and be able to get into and out of these assets. And so it does seem a little bit, I don't know, to steelman the other side. Um, is there a valid concern that the IRS currently has when in reality, people who are acquiring these assets have to KYC in the first place just to be able to acquire them?
I would say that I've always, though, what I've seen from being in the industry is that you're exactly right. Like, I would say, like, upwards of 90% of folks are KYC'd and and use those on and off ramps. It's very rare for folks to be buying and selling and only have exposed themselves via KYC, like via Bitcoin ATM or something like that, which are going to be required to take KYC as well, which would kill the Bitcoin ATM industry. Because no one's going to stand there with their social security number and scan their ID, at a Bitcoin ATM in order to buy Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, that's where I think they should be. That's where I think it should be. The regulations should stop is at the centralized exchange level, because that's where you on and off ramp between fiat and crypto, right? Mm, I would say upwards of 95% of people, that's how they interact with it. And so if your concern is closing that gap, that's an effective way to do it. I mean, the exchanges are already doing 1099 reporting, but I would just expand on that from the centralized exchange standpoint, and focus on those on and off ramp rails and not worry about the in between. Um, but it's always hard to come up with like the perfect solution, right? It's like, especially once the genie's out of the bottle, like the industry's so big at this point, it's really hard to, like, how do we figure out how to do this in a sensible way that accomplishes the goal? And really, what the goal is for the IRS is to to shorten the gap between the people who are complying with the laws and actually reporting properly versus the folks that are outside of that system. And I think the most effective way is to really just go after the people. You can see the evidence of what's happening the centralized exchanges via the 1099s that they already issue. So I think that's just going after the people that are clearly avoiding that via that aspect, which they're starting to enforce on, is really where to go. So I agree with you. I think that's where it's at.
So you think it's purely from just a monetary tax standpoint that they're imposing these regulations? Uh,
Uh, Not purely. I think that's a large portion of it, because there's a lot of money that's missed out on, from a reporting standpoint. But it's definitely as well, like, it's a control thing is really what it is at the end of the day. Like, it's a control thing. It's something that they don't have the reins on, and I think this is another way for them to effectively get some reins on the industry, right? Because you're basically making it go. I mean, the industry. Let's make something clear. People think that the industry is you're anonymous when you're acting on chain, and in reality, you're not. Like, if you've KYC'd anywhere, on-chain analytics firms like Chainalysis are going to be able to identify you. I've been recently using a tool. I think it's called like Alchemy or something like that. But it shows you literally, like, when you pull up a wallet, you can see what other wallets they've interacted with, and in like a web, and you can see the tos and the froms, and you can dig into each one of those. So, like, this is a free tool, right? chain analysis has amazing tools to be able to like look in and really dig into someone. So like identifying people on chain is not that hard. So I think that it just the challenge that it poses is that you're now requiring these decentralized actors to now centralize, like you were talking about, and collect data that they otherwise wouldn't have been. But the folly in that is that all like Pancake Swap, Sushi Swap, all of these are clones of Uniswap anyway. So if you shut down Uniswap for not complying, you can literally just copy paste the code. And now, though, as long as you transfer those assets over, you have a working exchange that just can be infinitely duplicated. It's not like it's code. So you know that's the irony in all of this is that if you shut down these actors, they could literally be back up and running in a matter of minutes.
Kind of feels like prohibition,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
trying to stomp something out, but people will still find a way to either be able to exchange through a decentralized manner, or um, you know, through various other mechanisms to get around the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does seem like, yeah, it will be interesting to watch over the next year or two as these regulations are put into place, and to see user behavior, and to see whether this is actually providing the effect that they want. Because I can understand wanting to ensure that people are paying the taxes that they're owed. For U.S. citizens, that's obviously a requirement, and we certainly don't endorse people trying to go around the law or circumvent those regulations. I just wonder whether this is actually an effective mechanism to be able to do so.
Exactly. And I think that like so one challenge of all of this is that so the ways that they're currently written, if you don't backup withhold, like so basically if you don't have a W-9 or a W-8 identifying someone, so it's like the US policing the world in a way, because you're basically saying if you as a decentralized exchange don't collect W-9 or W-8 info from people, you are forced to then do backup withholding. So you're going to have to withhold from folks that have no jurisdiction or no like aspect to like function in the US. Like they're not citizens, they're not residents, they don't live there. But because they don't have provide you with W-9 information, now you're forced to backup withhold from them and take like a 25% of every transaction that they make that would potentially go to taxes. Now you're forced to then parse that out. I just don't know how it's going to operate. And I agree. We're kind of going to have to wait and see to see how, are these exchanges going to comply? Are they just going to not comply and just kind of fly under the radar? Are they going to have to shut down? Is it going to kill DeFi totally? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, super interesting thoughts there. I, came from the product side with TradFi and 1099s and backup withholding. Like the burden it can create, even in just like, hey, you should have been doing this. It's like this could put the entire firm under. It's that massive of a risk, and playing catch up too. Like to these changes that go into effect 1 year, and then they're like, actually, we'll wait 2 years before we actually make this real or something like that. It's ever changing. Um, and I'm interested to just to see what this does to innovation within the space within the U.S. and whether firms start going elsewhere. I think this might actually segue nicely into potentially why maybe you went to Costa Rica, or your experience in sort of leaving the U.S. mainland and sort of building on your own. But curious if you have any thoughts around what this will do to innovation in the States and why you've ended up where you've ended up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to be perfectly frank, when I moved to Costa Rica, it was completely a lifestyle thing, and it just happened to be a really great like area for digital assets. I was like just entering the space, so I was still most of my income was coming from other kind of industries, so I wasn't fully like in. I was in the crypto space, but not as like active as I am currently. So it was honestly like a lifestyle thing for me moving into Costa Rica, and it just so happens that the town I moved to is literally known as the Bitcoin jungle as of recently, because we are like every cafe, every farmer's market, every restaurant all accepts Bitcoin. They all have the Bitcoin logo out there. There's a Lightning Network based wallet that syncs up with the banks here, so folks can accept Bitcoin and then transfer it to their bank. They also have we have a lot of OTC desks here as well. So and Bitcoin ATMs are popping up all around the country. But really, it is kind of fractionalized. So there's like a couple of different like hubs for Bitcoin, and then if you go to like a random town in, central Costa Rica, they won't even have heard of Bitcoin. So there is like definitely pockets of it. But yeah, I mean, the biggest reason I moved to Costa Rica honestly was surfing and produce. But now that I'm here, I'm really excited about. I've been very involved with some of the companies that are making strides. One of them is Pura Vida Bitcoin. They are actually in the process of rolling out a bank that would basically allow you to. A lot of the issues here with the banking system in Costa Rica is that they have they very much align with the AML like and KYC requirements that the US does, which isn't a bad thing. But some of their processes end up making things take way longer than they need to. So there's a lot of folks that are purchasing homes with Bitcoin now because they can avoid some of the escrow fees and some of the BS with the banks and transferring money here, because it's very like they want to see. I bought some of my land with money that I made from crypto, and it was like months going back and forth proving where I actually ended up sending them my DCAs from Coinbase for like 3 years back, to just prove that I had cost basis in these assets that appreciated to a certain degree. So, yeah, I mean, as far as like leaving the US, for me, it was like the political environment was kind of going downhill, and I didn't really necessarily like the direction that the US was going, and really just wanted more of a lifestyle change. So that's where Costa Rica came in. We had been traveling too for a while as well. We lived in our van for a while. We had like an 86 Vanagon Westphalia pop top camper kind of thing that we were driving around the States in. So we had been searching for where we wanted to live for a long time. And then our travels took us here and just felt like home. So.
Yeah, that's epic. And I applaud you for making the jump. And I mean, I think surfing and produce are two really good reasons to move somewhere as well. I'm sure just from a health and lifestyle perspective. I believe I saw recently, maybe this was a few months ago, you had bought a car using Bitcoin. What was that
I sold my
experience
car.
like? Oh, you sold
Yeah,
your
I sold
car.
my
Yeah.
car. Yeah. So yeah, I mean it was super simple. It ended up being a friend that was buying the car, and we talk crypto all the time, so it was just like an easy transaction to make. It was like I've been trying to sell it for a while. He doesn't really have much cash. He uses just Bitcoin, and he was like, "Hey man, I'd love to buy your car." Like he was like, "Do you mind if I pay in Bitcoin?" And I was like, "Would love that. I would prefer that. Let's do that." It was right around when the ETFs launched, so it was like I was like it was before the halving, so I was like, all right, let's go. And I'm in. That's where I'm moving all my money to is Bitcoin, not financial advice, but that's just like I see Bitcoin as the like that's the gold standard for me. And each cycle, I get more and more. I'm definitely not a Bitcoin maximalist by any stretch of the imagination, but I kind of like my spectrum kind of leans more and more to that in every cycle I'm a part of. So yeah, it was a good experience. It was just literally here's my ledger address, like send the Bitcoin, okay, received. Here you go. Here's the title. You still need a lawyer to do the actual transfer of the title, but we had proof of the transaction and all that. It was simple.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. I really like the future state. It sounds like you're kind of living in the future, getting to, go to a cafe and pay in Bitcoin, or, use a connection to your bank to be able to move your, Bitcoin out of a wallet into your bank. It's cool to imagine. I know when I was visiting Ruston a few months ago, we went to a couple farmers markets, and like, how cool would that be to just have another form of payment that you could pay as you're buying from a local farm or a local steward? Just really cool to think about.
And it's really interesting to see the buy-in from the Ticos here. Like the locals are, they see the erosion of currency, whether it's, the colon has been strong against the dollar up until recently, but, you know, they see the efficiency and how much less of a headache they have with dealing with their own banks and things like that, and so they really they get it right away, and they're like, okay, this makes sense to me. They don't really know how it works, not a lot. Some of them do, and we have actually like 5 minutes from my house. There's a retreat center called Awake, and they offer like Bitcoin meetups monthly where they do like education and outreach. So and actually. Jack Dorsey was down here. He hosted Nostrika down here last March as well. So there's like at that same location. So there's a lot of education. Bitcoin Jungle had like a Bitcoin Jungle Fest recently as well. So it's very cool to see. And it literally just happened that we moved to the one city in Costa Rica that's like fully adopted on Bitcoin.
That's amazing.
And
Incredible story.
Yeah, and they're actually trying to create like they're calling it a circular Bitcoin economy here, where they really want folks to be like in and operating just in Bitcoin. And I don't know how long that's going to take, but that's the goal for the people that are really pioneering here. So it's cool to see on a small scale.
I think that needs to occur. I think one of the biggest maybe detractors for a lot of people surrounding Bitcoin as like money is if people are assuming that it's going to go up in value, will they be willing to spend it on things? And that only really works if it's a circular environment, if you're getting paid into the asset, if you're buying things with the asset. And so it's encouraging to at least see these micro experiences or experiments in other countries. And even in certain local jurisdictions here in the US who are experimenting and trying to figure out what this looks like long term.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I guess we are approaching time. So I want to leave you with a final question, I guess. What excites you the most about the future of digital asset adoption and innovation? What do you see looking into the future?
I would love to be able to just like you're saying, like spend not just Bitcoin. 'Cause I'm a heavy ETH investor as well, and it's I wish that I was more in Bitcoin earlier on, just because of the way that ETH has been trending against Bitcoin. But I think we're in for a pump here soon. But yeah, just being able to like go around and spend my crypto as if it were fiat. Just like you're saying, like more effectively and efficiently be able to on and off ramp these assets. But I mean, I'm excited for banking and other services to be in the hands of more folks that don't have solid banking services. I think living here and seeing it here is one of the best examples of it. The bureaucracy and the red tape around banking is just so like obstructive that that's the thing that I want to see is the adoption for the folks that may not understand the technology, but it opens up doors for them to be able to store safely their money and not have it eroded. Yeah, I think that having sound money that's backed up by, and I mean, there's a lot of BS in the crypto world too, right? There's so many charlatans that are looking to just like make a quick buck off of some, like I've never been into the meme coin craze. I think it's hilarious to watch from the sidelines, and I love that like we have dog with that and all like
Same.
all these like these. It's fun, but like I'm excited for like the fact that there are legitimate projects that are out there solving real problems, and I want to see more of those kind of proliferate. And I think that the idea of decentralization in finance is so powerful that I don't want to see that hamstrung by regulations, which I think is the effect of some of what's happening in the US right now. And I think that the overreach here to see like the states like potentially forcing DeFi platforms to back and withhold from folks that have no jurisdictional nexus in the states is like absurd to me. So I just think that as more understanding develops, I think that we're going to get more common sense legislation. But when you have people that don't understand the tech trying to regulate, it causes problems, and it's a big challenge. So I think we'll see more lobbying from the big players in the space, and I think that aspect of it will help. But yeah, I want to see democratization of finance through banking, through access to lending and borrowing platforms that aren't requiring you to KYC and all of the above. And privacy is important too. Like I think that privacy should be protected. Just because you want your transactions to be private doesn't mean that you're doing anything illegal. So I think that privacy needs to be protected here as well.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. Well, with that, this has been an incredibly insightful episode. Thank you again for coming. Real quick, do you have any plugs or promos? Where can people find you? Anything you want to say about CryptoCFOs before we head out of here?
Yeah. So CryptoCFOs is an educational platform for tax and accounting and finance pros that are learning Web3 and digital assets. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can check us out at cryptocfos.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Taylor Zork. And I would love to connect with folks that want to learn more about this. We have a certification program for folks that want to get up to speed on digital assets. So whether you are a DIYer from a tax perspective, or you are just a tax pro or accounting pro that wants to get involved in the industry, it's a really great cert program that we have. And join us in the community. We are excited to add new members.
Fantastic. Taylor, this has been great. Thank you again so much for coming. And I guess we'll call it here.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course.